Welcome to the second episode of the amazing digital circus, and in this video, we're going to talk about what Gummy Goo's real purpose was, what happens to Candy Kingdom in the end, who turned out to be the main character of the new episode, and much more. And right away, we are greeted by a scene where Pomni gradually regains consciousness after the first day in the digital circus, and we notice how Pomni starts to turn into an abstracted monster like Kaufmo used to be. The circus trio makes Pomni more and more nervous, but after a couple of seconds, we realize that 99% of the fans were right, and the whole abstraction show was just a dream that Pomni had after the pilot episode. Ragatha knocks on Pomni's door, and, most likely, she is the one who woke up our jester. And before informing that Kane is preparing everyone for a new mission, Ragatha apologizes to Pomni for the scene that almost turned Pomni into an abstracted monster. And as soon as Kane gathered all the residents together, he immediately told them that Candy Career Chaos would be their new challenge, and the main task would be to get back the maple syrup that Gummy Goo and his partners Max and Chad had stolen. Zooble decided not to change her traditions, and as in the pilot episode, simply refused to take part in the new adventure, which greatly upset Kane, and all his pleas and entreaties were useless because in the end Zooble left. And realizing that the other residents of the circus, including Pomni, can simply refuse to Kane, decided against their will to send all the residents to the kingdom, and then we were shown a huge territory of this location. But most of all, I was amused by these gummy worms that look a lot like the characters from Slither.io. We understand that Fudge Monster is the #1 enemy in the city, and it should not be frightened under any circumstances. And we are also shown a huge crowd of NPCs who are very excited that now they have new characters in the kingdom. And judging by the route that dummies lined up in a line about 1 kilometer long, which is very much admired. However, while all the residents were happily watching at Candy Castle, one of the dummies shoved Gangle, which caused the comedy mask that was originally on Gangle to break again. But the reason for this behavior is Princess Lulilalu, or just Lu, because she asked to call herself that. She also mentions Kane as her god, which finally confirms that absolutely everyone in the kingdom is an NPC that is 57 times better than Gloinks. Princess Lu immediately befriends Ragatha and praises her behavior, which tells us that this character was quite possibly copied from Ragatha. And also the very key that has not given us repentance for a long time also revealed its secret, and we learn that it simply opens the gate to the city, but it should never be given to anyone, because if it falls into the wrong hands, it could very well be a disaster, which is what happened in the end. But more on that later. Lou also mentioned that Gummy Goo and his gang stole maple syrup and drove off in a truck, and to even the odds the princess gave the circus people a similar truck that Jax immediately wanted to drive. And this once again proves to us that Jax is an egoist who doesn't respect other people's opinions. But this capricious rabbit did not like the horn, and he immediately gave the control of the truck in the hands of Gangle, who just broke his mask. Then, we were shown the lair of alligators, and between them, there was an amazing conversation from which we learn that they need maple syrup to save their village. And also we learn that Gummy Goo is very loyal to his mom, and wants to return her by all means. All in all, everything was fine until Jax decided to go rogue again and started thinking he was in charge, and the main victim was Pomni, who he just threw out, which led to Pomni repeating the famous video. However, it was obvious that Pomni would not be able to stay in that position for long and would fall sooner or later, but that didn't stop Jax, who decided to shoot at Max with his weapon. As a result, Max fell out, and Gummy Goo decided to use Plan B and turned to the dangerous road with rocks. Max was the one who got hurt the most, and this is where the most amazing thing starts. Pomni struggles to keep himself alive while Jax again catches a note of selfishness and orders Gangle to ram the alligator truck under the pretext of revealing her big secret, which was a bad idea from the start. And since we see that the spikes were only discovered after such a drastic act, we realize that Gummy Goo didn't plan to kill or harm our characters in any way, and his only goal was to get the syrup back to the village. But only because of Jax's stupidity, Pomni was on the verge of death 2 times, and that's very serious. But as we know, Kinger is very unpredictable, and his sick brain decided to drop anchor to help Pomni. And of course, it didn't help, but made the whole situation worse. After all, the circus gang flew into the abyss and started falling into the chocolate river where someone lives. But I'm sure everyone will know who we're talking about. But something terrible happened to the alligator truck and Pomni herself, and if Max and Chad just flew off, Pomni and Gummy Goo fell through the textures. And this is the 4th time the creators directly tell us how unideal the digital circus is. And now we see Gummy Goo falling into some abyss, and realize that this is the so-called dungeon, which in the pilot episode was this weird gray room, with many rooms. And after a long time of searching for someone, Gummy Goo finds himself in a strange place that holds the avatars of all the characters involved in Candy Castle, including himself, And that's when it's revealed to us that this mysterious frame was just Gummigoo's eye. And just at that moment, Pomni also appears in the shot, and there is a dialogue between the two of them, where Gummigoo realizes that the whole circus gang is not just ordinary NPCs, even though he doesn't know the word. Pomni's words startle him, and he starts thinking about his mother and realizes that he doesn't know anything about her and doesn't even remember what she looks like. And then, the original image of the fudge monster appears in front of us. Then Jax and the others swim out from under the water, and the rabbit says some very funny words about how they look like Augustus Gloop, who likes chocolate a lot. After a couple of moments, the fudge monster himself appears before our eyes and introduces himself simply as Fudge. And there was no limit to his joy because for the first time he got someone just like that, and he was ready to eat absolutely everyone, including the truck, as Regatha completely changes the course of events and informs that all of them are not made of candy. And this confused Fudge so much that he refused to eat them simply because he can't, or rather, he is not programmed to. And then we realize that Cain is actually not so terrible as they think about him, because this scene meant 100% death of everyone present, but Cain thought about this moment in advance and reinsured himself, which means that he really cares about the fate of the circus inhabitants. And then Fudge starts his story that a long time ago he lived among all the NPCs in the city, but at one point, Princess Lulilalu decided to banish him, then very much offended our monster, and at the same time offended so much that he was mercilessly eating all the other NPCs just for fun, and he is very pleased to remember their screams. What if Gummigoo and his gang of alligators stole maple syrup to give to Fudge, and in return, the great and terrible monster wouldn't touch their village? This is most likely the exact scenario that was spelled out in their actions. And also Fudge's words that eating is not murder amused Jax very much, but at the same time made Regatha very angry. And Kinger mentioned for fun that this is the second time Pomni has missed a meeting with Monster. In the pilot episode, it was Gloink's queen, and in the second episode, it was Fudge. And it was at this point that Jax realized that their new adventure could be very, very exciting. However, our heroes don't forget their main mission, and Jax thought it would be fun to propose a favorable exchange. He gives the key to Fudge, and in return he helps them find the alligator gang. But I don't think this was done to save the maple syrup at all, but just to humor Jax. However, this exchange was not destined to take place because at the same moment, the alligators fell right in front of them, and there was no need to exchange for someone else. Then we see Pomni and Gummigoo again, and we can see how much Gummigoo is upset, and how Pomni tries her best to help him cope with the new reality, and she even offers him to become a new member of the digital circus. This scene is also notable because we learn that Pomni still remembers who she is and where she came from. And despite a very long negotiation and persuasion, Pomni still manages to convince Gummigoo to become her friend and join her in the digital circus. And we also realize that Pomni is actually a very clever girl who, thanks to her intelligence, was able to save them from being in this so-called dungeon, and a long way to freedom awaited them, as we saw in these shots. And as luck would have it, their truck fell on Fudge's head and caused changes in his body. And looking at this scene, a similar situation from the pilot episode comes to mind. Then there were not very significant events, but the main one is Sad Jax, who is very upset that his new friend has disappeared, and now his adventure has turned into a boring journey again. And also, I want to remember the fragment where Kinger directly says that he is not worried about Pomni at all, because he knows that in case of a real threat, Cain will save her, and apparently with Kinger himself, such situations have already happened. And here comes the parting scene in which Lou thanks us for our bravery and help. And everything would have been fine, but Jax wouldn't be himself if he hadn't tripled some bad behavior. And this time, he left the gates of the city open, and we hear Fudge approaching and ready to avenge all his wrongs. And I think Candy Canyon Kingdom will be completely destroyed after this. Well, Pomni is very happy to have a new friend that Cain quickly removed from the digital circus, making Pomni suffer even more. And a very funny part is the scene in which Jax loses his mouth, and the episode ends with a classic eulogy for the abstracted character that was Cuffmo in the pilot. And I'm 100% sure that the main character Gooseworx wanted to reveal is Pomni. After all, we have seen how real she is and how kind and brave she can be. And as the creators promised us, the episode turned out to be much more epic than we could even imagine. Have a good day, everyone, and see you in the new videos.